And we will post this to the webpage, so anyone who missed it can go back and watch it, or if you missed something, go ahead and keep yourself muted until we open it up for the question and answer portion. If you do have questions while we're going through stuff, JD's going to be monitoring it, and then she can interrupt Danny or I with a relevant question. Otherwise, she'll sort of make that that call on whether to save that question for later on in the discussion or bring it up while we're talking. So you can put that into the chat box, and then when we get towards the end, you can raise your hand and we'll call on you at the end when we're having that open discussion. Are there any more slides there, JD? For housekeeping? All right, we're gonna hand it over to Danny, and if I missed something about you, Danny, go ahead and start with your introduction, or otherwise I'll hand it off to you.
Thanks, Leslie. Hi, everyone. So just in case you are hopping on now and didn't hear Leslie introduce us all, I'm Danny Gilardi. I am the lead soil scientist for the Washington Soil Health Initiative working at WSDA. And before we get started today and talking about the nitty-gritty of our State of the Soils assessment and how we're hoping to partner with all of you, I thought I'd just start by broadly introducing the Washington Soil Health Initiative, or WSHI as you may hear it referred to, and sort of our overarching goals and objectives and some of what we've been working on. Next slide, please. So it's always good to just start with a brief introduction of what is soil health. The NRCS defines it as the continued capacity of soil to function as an ecosystem that sustains plants, animals, and humans. Next, JD. So when we say ecosystem, we're really talking about the chemical, physical, and biological parameters of soil. So the chemical being the nutrient profile, the pH, physical being the texture and the structure, and sort of most newly added to the soil health suite is the biological parameters, so microbial activity and community. And when we talk about soil function, we're really talking about a lot of different things that we expect our soil to do. We want it to hold water, to hold carbon, to remain fertile. We want it to regulate greenhouse gases, and importantly for a lot of people here in this room today, we want it to grow food, fuel, and fiber. And we want it to continue to do that over time and under a changing climate. And also, JD, you can go ahead and hit next. With minimal input from us as land managers. So this little sentence that the NRCS defines really encapsulates a lot of ideas and illustrates how much we expect our soils to do. Next slide. And of course, we know that it's not always that simple. When we are managing landscapes, there are a number of soil health challenges. So that can be compaction or erosion, acidification, or salinity and sodicity. Next slide. And luckily, there are a number of possible solutions. Most of you have heard about all of these. Many of you have probably already implemented a lot of these solutions. Things like cover cropping, crop rotations, liming, and adding carbon-based fertility to the synthetic fertilizers we may already be using, compost, manure, and so on. And so it should be really simple. We know what the challenges are, we know what some of the solutions are, but of course there's so much in between connecting the challenges to the solutions. We don't know where the solutions will work, we don't know if they will work, we don't know what they will cost in different crops in different regions, and that's really where the Washington Soil Health Initiative comes in. Next slide. So the Washington Soil Health Initiative is really aimed at connecting all of those possible solutions and more that aren't listed there to different land management challenges. The Washington Soil Health Initiative, or WSHI, is a partnership between WSDA, Washington State University, and the Washington Conservation Commission. And together, these three partners are working at improving soil health and improving grower livelihoods across Washington by providing research, outreach and extension, technical support, and funding opportunities. Next slide. So just to kind of briefly touch on some of the cornerstones of our work before we get into the State of the Soils assessment, I wanted to start with a project called the Washington Soil Health Roadmap, which actually was published in October of this year. So this effort was led by WSU, and it was a 2-year massive needs assessment where the state of Washington was divided into 8 distinct regions, crops, or constituents. So everything from wine grapes to potatoes to tree fruit to diversified ag and also the environmental issues. So in each of those 8 regions, we conducted exhaustive surveys, focus groups, and listening sessions. And the results were recently published in a 124-page roadmap. And this roadmap outlines within each of those 8 constituencies, what are the knowledge gaps, what are the challenges, what do growers want us as the Washington Soil Health Initiative to provide, and how long will it take before we can get to improve soil health in these regions. So there's a QR code at the bottom of the screen. I definitely encourage you to visit that webpage and download the Soil Health Roadmap if you're interested in hearing more. Next slide. Another cornerstone of the Washington Soil Health Initiative is long-term research, or what you'll hear referred to as LTERS. So these long-term agroecological research and extension sites are actually testing the impacts of some of those soil health solutions over time and all across Washington. So we are looking at this site here in the background at tillage intensity or different tillage intensities and different levels of organic matter input. And we're measuring over the long term what those practices do to soil health, to grower profitability, and to environmental outcomes. And we'll be doing that across Washington over time. Next slide. Of course, we want to know about economics, and I know a lot of people in this room are also interested. We at WSDA do not want to recommend practices that make it harder for growers to operate. So we want to measure what are the costs to some of these practices and what are the savings, and how long till a grower may see a return on their investment, if at all. Also, we want to know if growers will be asked to increase costs by implementing some of these practices, how can we best help offset those costs through incentive programs? Next slide. So this brings us to the work that you are all here for today, which is the State of the Soils Assessment. Leslie's going to talk a lot more about this later, but just to broadly introduce what it is we're hoping to achieve with this project is we're really wanting to link some of those biological, physical, and chemical parameters of soils to management history across the state and across different crops within the state. So you can see here from this map, in 2020 and in 2021, we worked with WSU and many conservation districts to take almost 400 samples in over 20 cropping systems. And we're going to use this data to develop Washington-specific soil health scoring curves. We want to know what are the maximum values we can expect for soil organic matter and what are the minimum. And then using the survey data, we want to be able to link the management history to how can a farmer improve his soil health scoring curve, whether that be carbon, fertility, or water holding capacity. So Leslie will talk a lot more about that today, but I also wanted to say, next slide, that while the scoring curves are going to be really important and they may help develop best management practices and decision support tools, we're also going to be rolling a lot of that data into an incentive program. So many of you may have heard about Sustainable Farms and Fields. This is a project led by the Conservation Commission, although we are the lead science effort in that project. And what we'll be doing is offering incentives to growers to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and increase soil carbon. And so what the data from the State of the Soil Health Assessment will do is help us determine where might we make the most impact, what practices may give us the most bang for our buck, and how can we support growers to implement some of these practices across the state. So the data is incredibly important, and that's really why we've invited all of you here today to talk about this effort. So last slide, this is a really brief overview for a huge project that many people have been working on for multiple years. I just wanted to kind of situate the discussion today, but if you do want to talk more, if you have more questions, comments, or ideas, I put my contact in the bottom right, and I definitely encourage any of you to reach out to me with any thoughts. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Leslie to talk about the kind of nitty-gritty of our State of the Soils Assessment.
Thanks, Danny. So I'm going to share my screen, and basically we're just going to go through the RFA for the Partnerships in Soil Health. Because you're here, hopefully you've already taken a look through this document. We tried to make it short and descriptive for you. Danny's pretty much already given you an overview of the project, our locations. So I'll just kind of start here on page 2. And as Danny said, we're really looking for additional partners to work with farmers to provide management history, get that information for soil sampling. Really, we're trying to identify growers, collect those soil samples, get that management data, and we've if you haven't already looked, we have a SOP, a standard operating procedure on our website as well. We do plan on making a couple small changes to that SOP. I think those will be rolled out here in maybe I'll wait for Danny to nod, the next couple of weeks. But those changes that we'll be making are going to make that process easier, not more complicated. And so instead of 0 to 6 and 6 to 12 inches, we're going to do that for one depth. So those will be 0 to 12 inches. So that should save some time out in the field. And then we'll probably limit the number or reduce the number of sampling points or probes that you're taking at each point out in the field. So just some things that we're trying to do to streamline the process, trying to make that SOP a little bit more user-friendly as we're rolling it out to other users. It was originally created as an internal document, so we're trying to make it a little bit more user-friendly for external users. So through this process, we will provide some training on soil sampling procedures. And what we have planned is 2 soil sampling field days. Those will probably be about 4 hours. We're planning one for the west side and one for the east side. What we're asking is that anyone who participates is required to attend those. We really want you to know how to soil sample according to our procedures. And so that way there's can be a lot of moving parts, and especially if you've never gone out and soil sampled before, we just want to make sure that you're following all of those procedures, from how to identify points in the field to cleaning the equipment. Any of you who have soil sampled with us before know that you started soil sampling, and I've come out and worked with you and given some advice, and that's been really helpful. I've heard comments like, oh, I wish I had known this sooner. So really, we're trying to get ahead of the game in doing some training before the season gets started, so that way we can make this process as easy as possible. We will be paying for funds for shipping those samples. We're having everything run at soil test laboratories in Moses Lake. So we'll be paying for all of the analysis of the soil samples and for the shipping to soil test labs. And then we provide personalized soil health reports for each of those growers. And essentially what that does is it takes all the sites and gives some bar charts, and then it shows exactly where those producers lay out in sort of the average of everyone else. So they don't see any data from anyone else, but they get to see where their data is in comparison to everyone else. So those reports look really well. I think it's very useful for those producers. And as we go through this process. As we get more cropping system information, we'll be able to provide more specific information to the grower for their specific crop. So that's really our long-term goal. We're really trying to increase understanding of soil health across Washington, based on cropping system, where they're at, where those producers are farming. And so our outcomes for the sampling program is to provide that baseline soil health data specific to Washington. As all of you know, a lot of these, if you look at the Cornell test or many of these other labs, they're getting a lot of data from the Midwest or the Northeast. And so what we're really trying to do is make sure that our farmers here in Washington have data that's specific to Washington. And so often those farmers will send off their soils, they'll get something back, and they might always score low on something. But for Washington soils, that isn't necessarily a low value. That might be a moderate value or a high value. It's just we have very different soils than they do in the rest of the country. We can't expect all of our soils to come out at 6% organic matter, for instance. And so we just really want to start helping farmers adjust their maybe expectations of what their soil is, and then what practices they can actually use to increase their soil health. So it really gives us a lot of information to be able to do that. So with the management survey, that will also give us information to be able to know which tools, which practices they're going to be able to use to improve soil health, or not improve soil health. There's a lot of practices out there that we know from the Midwest improve soil health, but those might not work here. So just trying to increase adoption of soil health practices that are applicable to Washington, and then engage, just have this conversation with producers about soil health and how to work with them to achieve some of their goals on their farm. So our priority areas, so this may be an area where you have a lot of questions and I expect to have some discussion about, is our priority areas. So the first one is comparisons of soil health management practices. So we're really looking at paired fields and that are similar in management history, climate, soil type, where, say, a producer, if you're working with a producer, maybe they've implemented a cover crop in one field, but they have a very similar field where there was no cover crop planted. That would be an example of a paired field. Same with livestock incorporation or compost application. We're really looking at field scale sampling. One of the reasons for this is because WSDA does crop mapping, and we crop map by field scale. And so WSU does a lot of small plot trials, and at WSDA, we're really trying to look at how the farmers are conducting these practices in situ. We're also looking for some reference samples. We are working with the Soil Health Institute, and these reference samples really give us a baseline of, if we weren't farming, what would that look like? So this would be our CRP, our native grasses. And if you want to pair a farm where someone is doing some management practices, I work a lot in no-till, so if they're doing no-till and we want to compare that to a place that has CRP, that would be something we would look at. The long-term data, Some of you may have been working with some of these soil health tests and have run them in the past. And so this would be an opportunity. Maybe you had a grant and that grant expired and you're interested in going back. It's been a couple of years and having those soils reanalyzed. So this is an opportunity to go back into those fields and have them run again. We would ask for the previous data that was run from a couple of years ago. So that's kind of our long-term data. How do we get that historical data and some of the management history that is associated with that? And then looking this diverse regions and crops, really you saw our map, and really we're trying to get soils information and capture what farming practices that are happening all over the state. We don't want to focus on any one area in particular. So this is your opportunity. If you feel like you're an underrepresented crop or area of the state, this is really an opportunity for you to say, hey, you know, we really need this because we have had no soil health sampling in this crop, and we'd like to do that. So, like I said, we're doing soil sampling through Soil Test Lab in Moses Lake. One, because they're a local lab, and two, because they are running basically all of the soil test parameters that we want to have run. So as Danny said, we're running chemical, physical, and biological properties of soil. You can see that list there. The exchangeable nutrients is, and you can go look at their S1, it's basically all your macro and micronutrients. We're looking at physical properties, texture, bulk density, moisture, and then a lot of those biological indicators that people really associate with soil health. So your potentially mineralizable carbon and nitrogen, POC, total organic carbon and nitrogen. So it's a pretty large suite of soil analyses that we're running, and we believe that it's a fairly comprehensive list. As I said before, we're looking at field scale, so we're going to consider one field, one sample. So we really don't want to see multiple replicates or randomized complete block design, any of that. We really want one field to be one sample. We are focused on sampling between April 1 and June 1. Part of this, the June 1 cutoff, has to do with fiscal dates, and this gives us enough time to process things. So, and then April 1 is just, we want the soil to have warmed up. We want some of that biological activity to be happening in the soil. And JD is going to go over the sampling equipment for you and take a look at that. And so one of the big things is that we really want to know that you have the funds to cover the cost of your time to go out and soil sample. So that's probably one of the that's one of the things with this grant, is we're not paying for your time to go out and soil sample, but we are providing the cost of the soil sampling, which is fairly expensive, and we're just really hoping that that is incentive enough for you guys to partake in this program. These RFAs are due January 25th, and our application form is pretty easy. I don't anticipate that it'll take you much time to actually fill out. We're really looking at just a couple of things in regards to how they're gonna rank out. So whether or not it's complete, if it fits into our priority areas, and your general ability to implement the project. And then we'll get back to you pretty quickly within a month, so mid to late February, on whether or not your project is funded, which will give those of you who are funded time to plan and attend our training in March. So just a couple of conditions of project approval. You guys will cover the cost of identifying and interviewing the producers, as well as the cost of labor associated with sampling. Attend one in-person training. Like I said, we anticipate those to be 4 hours. Commit to our SOPs. I realize we're going to make some changes, but none of those will be big changes, or the plan is to make those easier for you. Complete the field form while sampling, and that's just to make sure that where you guys are paying attention to some little stuff in the field. Usually takes about 3 to 5 minutes in the field to fill that out. And if you need to see a copy of what we've used in the past, let us know. And then complete our management survey prior to field sampling. And the reason we have this is we're still getting management surveys from this last year back. And so we'd really like to have those done prior to sampling. So that way, once you guys are done sampling, you don't have to worry about getting a hold of the producers. We want to do that at a point in time where the producers aren't busy and they're still thinking about it. And then you guys can go out and sample and you're done. And then we can go on and get the soil results back and have them analyzed and get all the information back to you. So again, just a reiteration, applications are due January 25th. We will have funding decisions announced on the 25th of February. We have required in-person training. We have scheduled dates. I think these are they tentative, or we don't have any other dates. So at this point, they're set in stone, I guess. One for Western Washington, we'll do that a little bit earlier because things warm up sooner. So on the 15th of March, and Eastern Washington on the 29th of March, and then complete the management survey by the 31st, and then sampling between April 1st and June 1st, and then we'll have those results back to you by October 1st. So, November 1st, I apologize. So let's take a really quick look at the application form for you. Name, organization, this is all pretty easy to fill out. And then we have our proposed details. So if the number of samples, you're going to put the number of samples.
Leslie, can you zoom in a little bit more? Thank you.
Is that better?
Yeah.
Thanks, JD. So this is really going to be the number of fields that you're going to be sampling. So if this is, again, I work in dryland wheat, so that's often going to be my example. So if I'm going to go in and I'm going to sample a conventional till versus a no-till, I'm probably going to put 2 here. I'll put county, Lincoln County. I'll put wheat in here, management practice. I would put conventional / no-till, and my priority area would be 1. And then I would just say additional comments would be, let's see, 1 or 2 fields, 1 conventional, 1 no-till. So just go ahead and fill that out. If I had more, you know, some with cover crops, I would just go ahead and fill those out according to that. So don't overthink it. Just fill it out the best that you can. I'll, you know, estimated month and week of sampling. Do your best on this. We understand that you're going to be filling this out in January, and sampling doesn't happen 4 months later. So, but try and get a good idea. You guys know your schedule. You probably know when other projects are coming up. So you probably have a good idea of when things might happen. Proposal summary. Just this is your opportunity to really describe your proposal. And also, I would suggest if you have, if this project aligns with another project that you have going on, this is a really great opportunity to describe how this interconnects with that other project, how it builds on some of the other work that you're doing. Doesn't have to be long, but just be really clear about what you're trying to do, what those pairs are, or how this works into WSDA's priority areas. So how it's a pair, how it's that reference area, how it's new to your area, those sorts of things. This is your base funding. So we really just, again, want to know that you have the ability to go out and do the soil sampling on with your own funds. So just make sure that you are identifying that. JD's going to go over the equipment. So here we really just want to know, these are kind of the big ticket items of the equipment. And so we just really want to know whether or not you have these equipment items or whether or not you need them. Summary graphics and tables. Personally, I always love pictures. I'm a very visual person. And so if you can show us where these places are, or what other information you have, anything supplemental is always appreciated. So give us a signature and yeah, and send it off. You have this email. This email is specifically set up. It's washi@agr.wa.gov. Any questions you have regarding this project can be sent to this email, and JD, Danny, or I will respond to that. Otherwise, if you have a question that you think is more specific to one of us rather than the other, we will respond. You can email us individually. So in this email works, or you can email us individually. So, all right, with that, I will let JD take it away from here. So stop share.
Okay, so I'm going to go through and walk through how to get to our webpage and how to navigate our webpage for all the RFA materials. So if you just Google Washington Department of Agriculture Soil Health, you'll get the very first link is the soil health webpage, and you'll scroll down to funding opportunities. And then this main page is showing kind of the key highlights from the document that Leslie just went over. So kind of the introduction to the project, what our priority criteria are, and then our timeline, and all of the relevant materials. So that document that Leslie went over, the application form, our SOP, our equipment list, all of that will be included on this main page. So I'm going to go over a couple things in the SOP. So just if you want kind of a preview of what you're going to be committing to, minus, the changes that Leslie mentioned as far as making things a little bit easier. This just gives you an overview of like what our procedures were, and then those management, survey, and field forms are at the very end as appendices. And again, these are going to be updated, so this is just what we used last year. So then the only other thing I wanted to add to the application form is for the supplementary graphics and tables, you actually have to open this as a separate PDF. It won't work in the browser. So you'll have to open it in Acrobat. And then if you just click in the box, you can browse to your image and insert it. And then the last thing was the equipment and supply list. So if you click this link, it'll open this web page that has a list of all of our equipment and supplies. So the probes are going to vary based on what fields you're going to be sampling from. So the slide hammer and soil probe, that looks like these two pictures down here. These are going to be for your harder soils versus some of your like more irrigated or softer soils. You can probably get away with just using the step probe. However, you will need the slide hammer for the bulk density samples. So that's what this looks like, is the slide hammer attached to the bulk density core sampler. So we can't actually like recommend a specific brand, but if you are needing help finding this equipment, communicate with us and let us know, and we can put you in the right direction. But we can't, like I said, advise like a specific company to purchase these from. But the like higher ticket items are the ones with the asterisks. The total for like if you want the step probe, the soil probe, the slide hammer, the bulk density core sampler, and the extension piece, it's about $700. But like I said, you don't necessarily need each of these items. So this list is just compiled of like all the things that we recommend you have on hand. Like some of them you might not use, like the sharpshooter or garden trowel. We can go over more specifics of like what you absolutely must have versus just kind of recommended equipment and supplies to have on hand. So if you have step probes or soil probes that are not exactly these dimensions, that's okay, as long as they do sample 12 inches deep. The bulk density cores, if you don't have a 2x6 inch core sampler or a 2-inch diameter, then we won't be able to provide you the metal cores that go inside. Like we only have the 2x2 inch ones and caps. So just be aware of that. And so the equipment that we'll provide is those 2x2 metal cores, caps, and the soil test bags and the Falcon tubes that are for our long-term soil samples. And then a lot of these items we'll provide at the training when we see you in person. I think that's basically it. You can just kind of go through and notice like any of the italic items we'll be providing, and it's got a note that says WSDA will provide. And I think that's it, unless Leslie or Danny have anything else to add.
Yeah, I noticed there was a question in the chat from Liz about equipment sharing, which we kind of assumed that this question would come up. There are last year in 2021, we did fund equipment out to quite a number of conservation districts in Eastern Washington. And so we're not sure how many of those conservation districts will be participating. But I think there could be opportunity for some of those. Technically, we still own the equipment. They are on permanent loan to those conservation districts. So I think, Liz, especially for your conservation district, I think we can connect you to a conservation district in your region where you can get this equipment. But I know that question will be for everyone. So there can definitely be, if you're a producer, there may be a conservation district in your region that has that equipment, but there is some opportunity for some equipment share. And one of the reasons why we want to know is because this will be a consideration for us, depending on, yeah, I won't get into that. We would like to know what equipment you need.
Yeah, basically, if you don't have the equipment, that doesn't prohibit you from participating. So definitely still apply, whether or not you are within range of a conservation district that already has it, or that we can connect you to someone, is still to be determined during the review phase. I'm going to read a couple of the questions that I answered, just in case anyone doesn't have access to the chat. And then Leslie, maybe you can take on the next unanswered question. Someone asked if there's a specific list of reference crops we're looking for. We're looking for samples in all crops. Anything relevant to Washington is of interest to us, and that includes forest, that includes rangeland. The only thing I can add to that is that if a crop has already been extensively sampled, it may be deprioritized next to one that has already, 50+ samples in it, but not necessarily depending on the management practices you may be proposing as well. So we're happy to answer questions about specific crops, but at this point, everything is on the table. And then someone else asked if there's a limit to the number of fields that you can apply for. Again, this is a bit of a non-answer, but we won't know how many we can fund until we get all of the applications. If one person submits an application for 1,000 samples, it's unlikely that we can fund them. However, if they're the only person that applies, then we could do our best. So I would recommend that everybody apply with what they hope to sample and what they know they have the capacity to sample. And then during the review phase, we will do our best to accommodate all of the applications that are eligible based on our criteria.
Yeah, I see another question in here, which I think is a really big deal, which is, can you talk about how producer information collected in this project will be used and made publicly available? Some producers may have current concerns about being exposed to lawsuits or enforcement based on management choices. This is kind of the I don't want to say the bane of our existence, but it's something that we grapple with a lot and have talked a lot about within WSDA, and we are hyper aware of. Our biggest challenge is that we still want to, because of all the mapping and being able to overlay these with counties and watersheds, we still want to be able to place these locations on a map. And then it's potentially a little bit more burdensome to have to go back to or to work through a third party to send out information, or to re-up with someone to send out new information. And so that has been a struggle this last year. Instead of just being able to send information out to producers, we have to go through a third party to send out information. So maybe Danny can talk about exactly our statement on this. But one, I would say it's something to be really upfront with your producers about what we're doing and talking about. And then I guess Danny, I'll let you share our statement on public disclosure.
Yeah, so basically any data product that comes out of this, whether it be a map or the soil health scoring curves, will not identify any producer in any way that can be sort of backtracked to identify who they are. So anything we put out will not disclose names. Everything that we keep, including the recording of this webinar today, is subject to public disclosure. And so even if we are not intentionally releasing it to the public, it's possible that someone wants this information and requests through the Public Disclosure Act. It could become available that way. So that is one thing to be very clear with your producer about. I think something that's important to note is that the soil health data that comes out of this is fairly innocuous. It's hard for me to imagine a scenario in which someone could be sued for having, low autoclavable citric extract. I can't remember the ACE acronym. The ACE protein levels, like it's pretty innocuous. Even the management survey questions, where we're asking people how they've managed their land, we're not asking for pounds of pesticides applied or pounds of nitrogen applied. We're asking really broad questions like, have you composted? How do you decide to apply fertilizer rates? Is it same every year or by soil test? There are questions designed to protect the producer but still be informative for us. So maybe if that's an issue for you, before applying, we can try to get a version of the management survey out so you can review it and decide if your producers are interested in participating.
Another question we have is, do we have a list of the conservation districts that have the equipment on permanent loan that can be published?
I guess I would say we don't, and we probably wouldn't. One, I would email, one, they're all in Eastern Washington. So I'll say that. And one, it would just be a direct relationship that I would probably set someone up with through communication, just because I want to, if they apply, we want to see how much they, if they're going to be sampling all the time, and so contact me. And you guys can raise your hand and chat or unmute yourself. We don't have to do this all through chat. That can be hard. But yeah, so just you can email me, and definitely I would say don't let equipment be the thing that stops you from applying at this point in time. Go ahead, apply. Don't worry about equipment. We'll worry about equipment as we move forward.
And also, Leslie's right that all of the CDs are in Eastern Washington, but I'm located in Olympia, and I also have a set of sampling equipment. So there is possibility to coordinate on that on the west side as well.
Yeah, and you can also include in your application form where you can specify, like, you have base funding, or one of those text boxes you can specify, like, hey, I don't have this, but I'm hoping to work with a conservation district to get this equipment. And then I saw Emmett commented seeing the management survey would be excellent. I'll note again that the SOP that's posted on our website, it has the management survey at the end as an appendix that is an older version. So it will be updated, but if you want to have a peek at like what we used last year.
Yeah, the management survey is being pretty extensively updated to ask slightly more specific questions about motivation or barriers to adoption. But there is an example on the materials as JD described. We're still working on the 2022 management survey. I would say it'll be done by the end of January, cross your fingers. So as soon as we can put out a version of that, we will.
Do you expect similar funding for baseline soil testing in future years, or is this a one-time opportunity?
Yeah, I think.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
You're the lead, Danny.
Yeah, I would expect that we run this program for the next few years. It's hard to know based on funding levels, and we don't want to take samples forever because at some point we want to be able to make some conclusions about the baseline soil health. But I would say at least for the next few years, this is a project we want to continue, both because we want to cover the whole state and many of the crops, but also because to say anything statistically significant, we do need a pretty robust sample population, and we can't collect that all in 1 year or with just a single one-off sampling. So at least for the next few years, I would anticipate running this program.
Yeah, and I would say this is, such a fantastic opportunity to engage with partners and work with all of you. So personally, I'm really excited about this opportunity, and I think this year we're really excited to see how it goes. We've changed a lot of things this year based on feedback from working with all the conservation districts in 2021 sampling season. So those of you who do partner with us, getting your feedback for what we do, in future years. It's going to be really, as really interesting, really exciting. I'm excited. Are there other questions about like what kind of projects might be eligible or ideas or, and you can raise your hand or unmute yourself or, yeah.
Yeah, one of the kind of hoped for goals with the Q&A is also just to get folks talking to each other, because it's possible we have a couple people in the room with similar goals and ideas and perhaps could partner. So definitely speak up if you have any questions on anything.
Kat's raising her hand.
Hi, everyone. I just had a question on what could a conservation district expect as the workload coming up, and what kind of projects could be eligible. Like we're pretty focused on CRP, wheat, and alfalfa here. Do those sound like pretty good projects to you?
Sorry, we're only smiling because we're struggling to know who should answer the question. Leslie, why don't you take this one and I can supplement if you missed anything.
Yeah. Again, there's always the advantage in doing doing the paired comparison, but definitely we want to see more of those samples on the reference sites. So, you got a couple of CRP sites in Walla Walla last year. If doing some more would be fantastic. Certainly capturing some of the conservation practices that are happening on wheat. So it's not just we're capturing wheat, but also what are the conservation practices that are happening in wheatland. So cover crops, no-till, conventional till, like how are people continuing to farm, or what are those farming practices that they're using? Does that answer it?
Yeah, thank you. I think that sounds great. It's a pretty exciting project for sure. I had one more question. The timetable that you guys put up earlier, is that something we can share with producers and, have deliverables ready for them along those times?
I would say the only piece that's beyond our control is how long the lab takes to return soil test results. So this year they had an oven breakdown and some unforeseen things that kind of delayed our timeline. Once we have the lab results, we can definitely turn around the individualized soil health reports within a month. So the timetable feels pretty realistic based on this year, barring anything really unforeseen. I know, Kat, you had also asked the question about the workload and just what to expect. Leslie, did you want to talk a little bit about what to expect from how long it takes to sample kind of broadly?
Yeah, I would say that if you have, if you're going out, 2 people out in the field to go sample, then I would imagine, depending, mostly I've sampled in dryland wheat. So you could probably sample, if your soil sampling is much easier, meaning push probes, rather than the hammer probes where you have harder soil. You're probably looking at being able to sample 4 fields in a day. If you're using push probes in an irrigated system, and not an alfalfa irrigated system, like a row cropping irrigated system, you're probably going to be able to get 6 fields in a day. So I think as far as sampling, that's probably a good estimate of the amount of time. The producer surveys, I think it really just depends on the producer. For instance, I sat down with a producer to do one of these surveys, and I was on the phone with him for 45 minutes. One, because we were just chatting about everything else, so it took a really long time. I sat down with another producer. I already had half of his information filled out, and it took us 3 minutes. So, I knew enough of his practices. He gave me the information I needed, and it was done. So it really just depends on how things go. So that's not much of an answer, I don't think.
No, that was perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, and I want to say about the management surveys this year, we're hoping to move to an online format, which for some people will work really well and for others not so well. And so depending on the producer, you may still need to make a phone call or schedule a meeting, collect that information, and transfer them online yourself. I think there will be a sort of hybrid approach to get everything into the online system. But unlike last year, for those of you who may have participated, it won't be an Excel spreadsheet that has more opportunities to accidentally click the wrong drop down, or there was some kind of challenges with some of the questions this year. I saw a question. It says, it seems your emphasis is strongly focused towards individual producers, but what about industry partnerships? Any thoughts there, and what would that look like? It's a really good question, and I can answer with some of the work that we are carrying out right now, and definitely, Leslie, if you have anything to add, that'd be great. So I wouldn't say that our work is strongly focused on the individual producer for this. I think if there is a specific industry that wants to participate, we highly encourage it. The potato work, for example, from 2021 and 2020 was largely in collaboration with the potato industry. And so there's the possibility to, if you represent all Washington carrot producers, and you want to apply because you have really strong access to getting them all to fill out a survey at once and offer up their fields, then we all of a sudden have a really robust carrot data set, and that's something we don't have right now. We're definitely interested in those partnerships because they're easier for us to run rather than finding one producer at a time. And also because we want industry support and collaboration in this effort. One project that we're working on right now, I mentioned briefly in my overview, is that we are trying to capture some of the impacts of drought in dryland wheat, and specifically to find out about whether or not soil health management practices helped or did not help producers weather this last drought. And so we have wheat partners who are helping us distribute the survey and also helping us develop the survey. And it's been a great collaboration because here at WSDA, we are not necessarily dryland wheat experts. We need those industry relationships to develop a survey that is actually capturing what we want to know. And so I can imagine that there's other efforts that could be done in other crops, specifically as we wrap up the wheat work. How can we tailor that survey to capture the economics of soil health management practices in other systems? And we would definitely want industry collaboration on that.
Yeah, I think that's really well said, and I think there's a lot of opportunities for us to partner and work with industry partners, and really in doing that we could have a much more robust data set that would be really useful for an industry. And AJ, if you have something, feel free to unmute yourself if you want to partake more in the conversation. So.
We don't want to leave anyone out of this effort, whether it be a grower who submits a single field because they're curious about their soil health, or an industry representing 1,000 growers. We kind of want to make sure that everyone is included in this as we move forward in the initiative.
AJ here. For us, I think that's probably something you may need to set up a time that we could meet with our team, and we could have some further discussion of how we could work together, because we both have the same goals and trying to answer the same questions.
AJ, I haven't met you before. It sounds like Leslie has. Can you mention who you represent?
Oh, I work with Lam Weston.
Yes,
so,
okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
And I think one of my colleagues already probably reached out to you guys about, because we also have a similar effort looking into soil health. And so that's, yeah.
I spoke with Deirdre, and I can't remember the name of your colleague, but the three of us have an email chain, so it's nice to meet you.
So it'd be nice if we all could get together and make sure we're not going by ourselves and trying to answer the same questions, when we all could just work together to get there.
All right. Thank you so much, AJ, and I think we'll definitely have to connect. Are there any other questions that we need to answer?
Hey, it's Becca from Foster Creek.
Hi, Becca.
Hey, guys. So I have a question. So you're looking at this field to field, and what we're doing here at Foster Creek's a little bit smaller scale. We have soil types, just because we have a lot of soil types represented throughout all of our fields. So in terms of that, when it comes to sampling, I did read through some of your SOP already, which is fabulous, by the way. And I was just wondering if there was any concern of staying within those soil types, especially here in Douglas County, or if, we could sample across several soil types within that same field, since it is looking at a management base.
Yeah, I think our because we are working at this statewide scale and we don't have the opportunity to sample within like a randomized complete block design with texture being the only variation. Unfortunately, we can't do too much of this really nitty-gritty comparisons, but we're definitely interested in the effect of texture on soil health. And so I would say ideally people are applying to take, for example, in the paired sites, the same soil texture till and no-till, the same soil texture cover cropped and not cover cropped. But we recognize that within a single field, there could be 5 different soil theories. And so I think for us, knowing what the soil series is really important. So we'll have like a GPS that you can put your point in and we can download what that series is. So at the very least, we can control for that in our analysis. And also, for example, the soil health scoring curves we're working on are likely to just be separated out by coarse, medium, and fine. And so even though there's so much textural variation within that, we just can't have a 50 unique scoring curves. And so we'll likely bin things into broader categories either way. But it's good to know. Leslie, do you have anything to add to that?
I don't think so. I was just going to say our SOPs were originally based on your SOPs, so and QAP. So thank you, Becca.
Collaboration's what it's all about, right?
It is.
Becca, did that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. And I mean, I can talk with you a little bit further if because I'm trying to meld, what we're currently doing into this. And so, that's something I can do over here on my end of it. And then we can kind of check to see if it's okay, but it should be. If you're doing that broad-based approach, it'll be pretty easy. So kudos, guys.
Yeah, and just to reiterate, like for anyone on the call, feel free to reach out, or we can set up a short call. We're more than happy to chat with you guys, about your project. I mean, in my opinion, soil health is what we do, and we're here to collaborate with you guys and work with you guys, whether or not it has this. I guess this is me saying this, so Danny, nod your head or not. Like, we're here to collaborate with you guys on soil health and working on soil health practices, whether or not it has to do with this RFP or not. So that's what we're here as a state agency to work with partners throughout the state. So we're here for those sorts of things.
So I just wanted to confirm that the RFPs are due January 25th at 5 p.m. and that we're supposed to identify the producers that are willing to participate. And that will are our projects. Is that correct? Okay, thank you.
Yes. All right. Well, maybe let's take one more question and then we'll call it good. Seems like things are slowing down. Someone has a question. They've just been afraid to speak up because they think it might be a dumb question. It's not. That's usually me. I'm like, I'm not going to ask my question. Anyone?
So Rodney says that he has a producer who participated in the sampling from 2021, and he has questions about his field data. Who should he call on your team? Leslie or I, or both. I can provide. I think Rodney, you have both of our contact information. If it's a question about the results and the report, I'm probably a good contact. If it's a question about something more broadly about the program, Leslie would be a good contact.
All right. Oh. Yeah, we can. I would not worry too much about where crops, as far as location reference. I mean, if you're trying to get a county, in your case, there were some tree fruit samples, Liz, taken in Chelan County, but it wasn't very many. That's the only thing that were pulled. If you want it for VSPE, which you don't work on VSP anymore, but yeah, I wouldn't I wouldn't worry too much about where samples were pulled before, or if you're in a county like Grant, where there were a lot of samples pulled before, I would just maybe think about what other. Thanks. JD answer. Somebody else answer. I'm getting tired. My brain's not working. Words aren't coming. Danny, do you have an answer?
Sorry, I didn't answer. I just posted the link to the funding opportunities page.
All right, great. Anything more you want to add, Danny?
No, I think that sounds great. Yeah, I don't worry too much about the specific location. There are some crops that we've really not exhaustively, but comprehensively sampled from, and others not so much. I would say if you have an idea, apply, and we'll go from there.
Thank you. Danny's words. All right. Again, if you guys have any questions, feel free to email us at the WSHE email address, or email us individually, and feel free to, if you have something a little bit more extensive that can't be fit in an email, like set up a meeting with us. We're happy to chat with you. So, all right, with that, I think we'll let you go, and we're so excited that you guys joined us today, and we're really looking forward to seeing your proposals and working with you over this next sampling season.
Katie, do you have a sense of where and when this presentation may be posted?
I would say within the week.
Okay. So yeah, check back.
And then I'll just add to, for the application forms, like if you could email those to the WSHE email address, that would be great for us to track a little bit better than emailing those to individual people. But for questions, specific questions, please feel free to email Danny or Leslie.
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks.